Welcome to our deep dive into the world of haiku. You sent us some fascinating material, excerpts from the Haiku Masters, four Poetic Diaries by Gail Scher. But it's not just any haiku collection, is it?
Not quite. It's a really unique format. It's called haibun, a blend of prose and haiku, you see. And it creates these beautifully poetic, like biographical sketches of four masters, Basho, Buson, Issa, and Shiki.
And in the preface, Andrew Schelling compares these masters to guardians of the four directions of haiku, each representing a distinct approach. I'm so intrigued to explore this, their lives, philosophies, and styles, and help you understand why haiku remains so powerful even today.
Well, let's start with Basho then, often considered the father of haiku. He rejected societal norms,
They're short.
forged his own path, what he called the way of elegance, or fuga no michi, through art.
The book emphasizes how Basho sought meaning beyond the material world. Is that reflected in his poetry?
Absolutely. His poems often embrace simplicity, natural imagery, and a feeling of tranquility. You might even know his most famous haiku, an old silent pond, a frog jumps into the pond splash. Silence again.
It's incredible how those simple words can create, like, such a vivid scene. It's like you're right there at the pond, experiencing that stillness before and after the splash.
That's the essence of mushin, or artlessness, which Basho championed. Like in his poem about children running out to see hailstones, he just presents the scene without embellishment, allowing the reader to experience it directly.
He's inviting us to rediscover the wonder in the everyday, isn't he? Seeing those hailstones with the same excitement as a child.
Precisely. And then there's sabi, a key concept for Basho, often translated as elegant loneliness. It's that beauty found in imperfection and solitude. His haiku about departing spring embodies this perfectly. Departing spring, birds crying tears in the eyes of fish.
That feeling of melancholy, the beauty of things passing. It's almost like sabi itself is a form of poetry.
Basho had other aesthetic principles too.
What?
Yugen meaning depth of meaning, aware a kind of elegant sadness, and Makoto sincerity. It smells like he created a philosophy around haiku, a way of observing and experiencing the world.
And he encourages us to find our own path within this framework, as he famously said, don't follow in the footsteps of the old masters, seek what they sought. So who's next on our journey?
Let's move on to Boson, a fascinating figure who is also a talented painter.
Ah, that explains the vibrant imagery in his work. The book highlights his haiku about foxfires. Mysterious lights glowing in tall, dry grass, foxfires dance and gleam. Reading it, I'm transported to that moonlit field, the cool night air, the rustling grass, and those flickering dancing lights.
His background as a painter definitely shines through in his evocative descriptions of nature. But Buson also held deep respect for Basho, even journeying north to retrace Basho's footsteps. It's as if he was paying homage to his predecessor, while also forging his own path.
Speaking of paths, the book mentioned a humorous anecdote about Boson's encounter with a mischievous badger. Tell me more.
Well, while staying at a villa, Buson was terrified. For 4 straight nights, by loud banging on the doors, he feared he was a ghost. But it turned out to be a badger playing tricks. And get this, the day after the badger was killed by a villager, Buson was so distraught, he gave alms to a monk to pray for the badger's soul.
It's a wonderful reminder that even these great masters had a sense of humor and deep compassion for all beings. It also seems to tie back to that idea of interconnectedness we see in so much haiku.
Absolutely. Another haiku of Buson's that captures this beautifully is his comparison of a ring around the moon to a frayed old umbrella. It's a simple observation, yet it reveals his ability to find beauty in the mundane.
I'm really appreciating how each of these masters had such unique perspectives while still working within the haiku tradition. So who's next?
Let's delve into the world of Issa. His life was marked by hardship and loss, poverty, the deaths of his mother, wives, and even several of his children. His deep empathy for suffering resonates throughout his poetry.
It makes his haiku about the injured crow even more poignant. A crow, injured wing, dark against the winter sky, such is my life now. I can feel the weight of his personal struggles in those lines.
It's raw and honest. Yet despite all the hardship, Issa also found moments of beauty and grace in the ordinary.
Like his haiku about the frog's grave. Bowing over the frog's grave, cherry blossoms fall and drift, life's fleeting beauty. It's so simple, yet profound. He finds solace in a small act of kindness, appreciating life's ephemeral nature.
In another powerful haiku of his, describes visiting his friend's grave, only to be turned away by the successor.
That image of loss and longing, heartbreaking.
It speaks to the fragility of connection and the enduring power of memory. Issa truly had a unique ability to capture the joys and sorrows of everyday life, especially for common people and creatures.
So tell me about our final haiku master, Shiki.
Shiki was the youngest of the four, and instrumental in bringing haiku into the modern era. He struggled with tuberculosis throughout his life, and this deeply shaped his perspective.
How did his illness influence his poetry?
Well, it instilled in him a sense of urgency, a desire to capture life's fleeting beauty. This led him to emphasize shase, meaning sketching from life, encouraging poets to directly observe and capture those fleeting moments.
That focus on direct observation fits perfectly with haiku's emphasis on capturing a single vivid image. I'm thinking of his haiku about the temple gate. A temple gate creaks, the sound of wind through the crack. Silence fills the air. He captures both the sound and the silence so beautifully.
He was a master of using sensory details to evoke a mood or feeling, and despite his illness, Shiki was determined to keep writing, even dictating poems from his sickbed.
That's true dedication. What stands out to you about his philosophy?
His emphasis on experiencing and appreciating the present moment, even in the face of adversity. He famously left instructions for a joyful funeral, wanting people to celebrate his life rather than mourn his death.
It's a beautiful way to approach life's end, focusing on the positive and finding joy in the present.
And it speaks to the enduring power of haiku, a form Shiki championed and modernized.
So now that we've met all four masters, what are your key takeaways from this exploration?
What's truly remarkable is how each master found their own unique voice
Yeah.
within this seemingly simple form.
The Haiku Masters brought that to life through its blend of prose and poetry, giving us intimate glimpses into their personalities and philosophies.
And it reveals a lot about the evolution of haiku itself. We see how Basho's focus on sabi and evocative simplicity paved the way for Buson's vibrant imagery and painter's eye. Then there's Issa, with his deep empathy for common people and creatures. And finally, Shiki's modern perspective and emphasis on direct observation.
It's amazing how they each contributed to expanding the possibilities of haiku. But it's more than just art, isn't it?
Exactly. These masters used haiku as a way of engaging with life, processing their experiences, and finding meaning in the world around them.
And that's what makes haiku so enduring and universally appealing. It transcends cultural boundaries and speaks to something deep within us all.
It reminds us that poetry can be found everywhere, if we just take the time to look and listen.
After learning about these masters, I'm feeling inspired to try writing my own haiku.
That's fantastic. What resonates with you most from what we've discussed?
I think it's that realization that haiku isn't just about counting syllables. It's a way of seeing and being in the world. It's about capturing the essence of a moment, an emotion, an observation in just a few carefully chosen words.
And that's why it continues to resonate with people even today.
So before we move on to deeper insights into each master, I have a question for you. If you were to write a haiku, reflecting your own experiences and observations, what would it be?
That's a wonderful question. Let me think for a moment. Okay, here's what I came up with. Pages turn and whisper. Ideas spark and take flight. Knowledge sets us free.
That's beautiful. It perfectly encapsulates the joy of learning and discovery and the power of sharing knowledge, which is what we're trying to do in this deep dive.
I hope it inspires you to see the world through a haiku lens.
I'm already starting to. But now let's dive deeper into the individual masters, starting with Basho.
Basho's Fuga no Michi, or Way of Elegance. It wasn't just about artistic expression. It was a way of life.
That idea of finding elegance in simple things, in nature and solitude, it almost feels like a countercultural movement, even now.
Exactly. And it was even more so in Basho's time. Remember, he was living in 17th century Japan, a society with strict social hierarchies and an emphasis on material wealth. Basho rejected all of that to pursue a life of art and spiritual exploration.
The book describes how he gave up his comfortable life as a teacher to become a wandering poet, traveling on foot and immersing himself in nature. That must have been a radical decision at the time.
Absolutely. He was deliberately choosing a life of simplicity and uncertainty. It was about stripping away the unnecessary and focusing on what truly matters, connecting with nature, with oneself,
Yeah.
with the deeper truths of existence.
And that connection is so evident in his poetry. When I read his haiku, it's like he's distilled those experiences into a few perfect words.
That's the power of sabi. It's not just about loneliness. It's about recognizing the beauty in impermanence. Think about a weathered stone, a fallen leaf, the sound of wind through bare branches. These are things that might be overlooked in a culture obsessed with youth and perfection. But Basho finds profound meaning in them.
You know, it makes me think about how we live today, always rushing, always striving for more, Maybe we could all learn something from Basho's Fukunomichi, finding those moments of quiet contemplation in our own lives.
I think you've hit on something important. Basho's philosophy is just as relevant today as it was centuries ago. It's a reminder to slow down, appreciate the simple things, and find beauty in the imperfect.
So how did this way of elegance translate into his writing style?
It's all about capturing the essence of a moment with minimal words. Basho believed in using evocative language. That sparks the reader's imagination, allowing them to complete the picture in their own minds. He famously said, "Learn about pines from the pine and about bamboo from the bamboo."
That's so poetic. He's saying that true understanding comes from direct experience, not from books or theses.
Exactly. And that's why his haiku are so powerful. They're not just descriptions, they're invitations to see the world with fresh eyes.
As we discussed earlier, Buson was heavily influenced by Basho, even following in his footsteps. But what makes Buson's style unique?
Well, as you pointed out, his background as a painter comes through. In his vivid imagery and attention to detail, he wasn't afraid to use bolder, more colorful language than Basho, creating haikus that are almost like miniature paintings.
It's interesting, though, because despite those differences in style, they both shared a deep reverence for nature. And that mischievous badger story really highlighted Buson's compassion. It makes me wonder if that's something he learned from Basho's philosophy.
It's certainly possible. Remember, Basho believed in the interconnectedness of all things. Perhaps Buson's encounter with the badger deepened his understanding of that principle.
I love that idea. It's like the Haiku Masters are having a conversation across time, each one building upon the foundation, laid by those who came before.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it speaks to the enduring power of haiku. It's a tradition that's constantly evolving, while remaining true to its core principles.
Speaking of evolution, let's move on to Issa. We talked about his empathy for suffering, but what else stands out about his style?
Issa is often called the people's poet because he focused on the lives of ordinary people and creatures. He didn't shy away from depicting poverty, hardship, or the harsh realities of life. In fact, he often found beauty in those very things.
It's like he's giving a voice to the voiceless, recognizing the dignity and worth of those who are often overlooked.
Exactly. And he does it with a blend of humor, sadness, and profound compassion. Think about his haiku about the snail climbing Mount Fuji. Slowly, slowly up the Fuji mountain, a snail. It's funny. But it's also a celebration of perseverance, of making the most of your circumstances, no matter how challenging they may be.
It's that resilience in the face of adversity that really resonates with me in Issa's work. He experienced so much loss, yet he still found a way to see the world with a sense of wonder and appreciation.
And that's what makes his haiku so relatable. He reminds us that we're all in this together, facing our own struggles and triumphs.
It's also interesting how Issa's focus on the ordinary aligns with Basho's emphasis on finding beauty in the everyday. Even though their styles were quite different, they shared that common thread of appreciating the simple things in life.
That's a great observation. It shows how these masters, despite their individuality, were all part of a larger conversation about how to live a meaningful life and capture that meaning in art.
So how does Shiki, our final master, fit into this conversation? Shiki seems like a bridge between the traditional world of haiku and the modern era.
He was very much a reformer, challenging some of the conventions you see. That had become almost sacred. He believed haiku should reflect the changing times, embrace new subjects and styles.
But he also championed direct observation, which feels very much in line with Basho's, you know?
Yeah.
Learn about pines from the pine philosophy.
Absolutely. Shiki emphasized chasse, meaning sketching from life. He encouraged poets to go out into the world, observe their surroundings carefully, and capture those impressions in their haiku. He felt this direct experience was essential for creating authentic and moving poetry.
That makes me think of his haiku about the temple gate. A temple gate creaks, the sound of wind through the crack, silence fills the air. It's such a simple observation, yet it transports you to that place, makes you feel the stillness and the weight of history.
Shiki was a master of capturing those fleeting sensory details. He also believed that haiku should be accessible to everyone, not just a select few. He wanted to democratize the form, make it a part of everyday life. That's why he encouraged people to write haiku about their own experiences, no matter how mundane they might seem.
That's so inspiring. He's saying that everyone has a story to tell. And haiku can be a powerful way to share those stories. It's not about being a literary genius. It's about capturing the essence of a moment, an emotion, an observation.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes haiku so enduring. It's a form that's constantly evolving, adapting to new times and new voices.
It's like a conversation that's been going on for centuries. And we all have the opportunity to join in.
I love that analogy. And it's true. We can learn from the masters who came before us, but we can also bring our own unique perspectives and experiences to the form.
It makes me think about that haiku you wrote earlier. Pages turn and whisper. Ideas spark and take flight. Knowledge sets us free. It's so personal, yet it also speaks to something universal. The joy of learning and discovery.
Thank you. And that's what I hope we've achieved in this deep dive, to spark that joy of discovery in you, to inspire you to see the world with new eyes, maybe even to try your hand at writing a haiku or two.
You've certainly inspired me. I'm starting to see haiku everywhere now, in the way sunlight filters through the leaves, in the sound of rain on the roof, even in the hustle and bustle of city life.
That's the magic of haiku. It's a way of finding poetry in the everyday, of appreciating the beauty and wonder that surrounds us.
And it's all thanks to these four masters, Basho, Buson, Issa, and Shiki. They've shown us that haiku is more than just a form of poetry. It's a way of life, a way of seeing the world, a way of connecting with ourselves and with each other.
They've left us a rich legacy that continues to inspire and challenge us today.
I can't thank you enough for guiding me through this deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of haiku and its enduring power.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, the exploration doesn't have to end here. There's a whole world of haiku out there waiting to be discovered.
So to our listeners, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep reading, keep writing, and most importantly, keep finding those moments of poetry in your everyday life. Until next time, happy haikuing!